Hi, welcome to Instant Impact Events. I'm CJ.
And I'm Cheryl. Hi guys, welcome to another awesome episode.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, today we have a very important topic that not a lot of people talk about, but it's very integral to having any type of event that you're going to be having. And that is
test and backup. Test and backup and test and backup.
Exactly. And the more that you test and back up things, the smoother your event is going to be, because then you know that everything is working because you've tested it and you have your backups in case anything does happen.
It doesn't take a lot of time just to do a few extra steps to make sure it's the same as it was the day before or during setup.
And it makes all the difference, because specifically when we're talking about testing and backing up, it's a lot of audio visual things that we're discussing, because in any type of an event that you're having, the audio visual aspect of that can make or break your event.
Right, it has to be right at all times.
So today we're going to go through some of the things that you can be doing that you want to make sure that you're testing prior to the event.
Correct.
Also, every day of the event, you want to be testing these things, because things happen at night. I mean, I don't know what
it does. It's
little gremlins come in at night.
Little ghosts that come in. You're all good the night before.
It happens.
Good night's rest.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you wake up.
You go and you turn everything, put everything
turn
back.
on the mic and you're
and it's just nothing has changed really, right? Except something has changed. That's something that when we're talking about, you're initially doing your tests, but then you're also testing every single day of the event as well. And you gotta get in the room earlier. You gotta make sure things are tested before your doors are opening or before things are starting, and that way each and every day things are working accordingly.
Yes. So the first thing is your mics.
Yep.
You must test your mics. I know you used them the night before or the day before just to make your checks, your mic checks.
Well, also you need to test them when you initially set them up too.
Right, as soon as you set up your everything.
Yeah.
And if your speaker's in the house, make sure he does a mic check also, so he knows what he's going to expect the next day also. And make sure your frequencies are right. Make sure all your mics are on at the same time. Because just say they're going to call somebody up on stage and they're going to call somebody else on stage, and then they're going to ask questions. So you need that other mic for that. And sometimes they might overlap and
you also want to test the mics throughout the room in different areas, because sometimes there's Q&A that goes on, so you might be talking to people, or maybe the speaker is walking over closer to another actual audio speaker, so you want to have all these things tested, not just from standing in one spot, walking around, having multiple mics being used.
And also let your speaker know, also watch out for the speakers,
if there's
even
hot
though
zones.
You think they would know. And you can let them know also.
Yeah. If there's hot zones, which sometimes there are, you need to make everyone aware of where those are, so everyone can stay away from those areas.
And also at frequencies also, sometimes there's going to be an event next to you. You may be able to get their frequencies also. Just ask the AV company for that hotel. If they have one, most likely they do. And they'll give you a frequency list of who's using those frequencies also, so to make sure you don't get stepped on during your event.
And when he means stepped on, he means like someone coming, the frequencies are fighting each other, and so that's when you get those screeches or the static noise,
cut out,
or you
hear
hear like a cut, or just disruption.
Yes.
And out of the event, people hear even more than what they see, right? So having any type of audio issues, which normally stem from mic issues and frequencies, that is something that is perilous to your event if that's constantly happening, because people hear that all the time. And normally if it starts, it's not going to stop, right? It's a continual thing. And so by testing when you set that up, and then testing each day, because sometimes things change, right? Maybe there wasn't an event next to you and now there is.
Right.
Or maybe someone was using a different frequency and now they're not. Sometimes if you're closer to the airport, sometimes they're using different frequencies those days too. And it changes. And that's why we talk about the importance of making sure that you're testing when you initially set it up, but then also every day of your event as well.
And lunch also. Yeah.
Before you come back from lunch, you want to do a quick
check.
test just to make sure that's
It'll take
working.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Also, the next is projectors. Things happen with projectors also. They're fine 1 minute and not the next.
I mean, seconds they can.
Yeah, the filters, make sure the filters are clean. If you're renting your equipment, just please make sure that you ask and even check if you can, make sure the connectors are done, make sure the cables are even put away or even taped down in front of the projector, because at night people come back and forth to clean the rooms, and you'll even notice sometimes they'll get bumped. So you have to check and make sure everything is focused.
That it looks good on the screen.
It looks good on the screen.
Yeah.
And you're checking your PowerPoints and stuff as soon as you get in the room, and everything you need for that also.
And that comes, we talk about test and backup. It's good to have a backup projector too, because if it does go out, or if it is having an issue, or maybe the bulb starts going on it, or it's, I don't know, sometimes they overheat. I mean, they're very,
They can overheat.
Yeah, there's
and
all
they can
kinds
turn
of things.
off
Yep.
because number one, it starts from the filter being dirty, and then not being checked and maintained.
So these are all things to think about. And if you're bringing in your own equipment, then you need to know this. If you're if someone else is bringing in the equipment for you, asking them if you can have a backup projector, or if something
knowing
happens,
how close they are.
how long does it take them to get there to get this squared away and fixed? All of those things are important questions to ask, so that you know, because maybe you just could take a break, right? And people could go have an unexpected break, but and things can be fixed within that, versus taking hours.
And sometimes you can, even though it might be close to a break or not, just to fix that challenge, have the speaker just do a 10-minute break.
Yep.
That's it.
Because sometimes all it takes to fix things and get them back on track.
Number one, it's already unplugged.
Yeah.
It's already off. You don't have to worry about anything cooling down or anything. You can already disconnect everything and have it ready to go. The next is the lights being synced for the room. And because what happens is the room, you could be in a large room, but then they block off the room in different sections with the air walls, but the lights aren't synced. They can turn off your lights next door. You want to make sure you do that right away. You test them. You make sure you have light people for the lights, because most likely they're not going to be one switch for the lights. There's going to be 3 spots.
And that's something that a lot of people don't think about, are the lights.
Right.
I mean, you walk into the room, they're on, and yet a lot of times people are showing videos or other things. You want to dim
You want the
lights
lights down for video.
in the room, right? Well, if you are in multiple rooms and you haven't thought of that, then maybe you turn off this switch and it turns off the center section, but it doesn't turn off the sides. And so you can sometimes work with the venues
And
on
you can
getting
tape
them
off,
to sync.
Yes, and you can tape off certain lights that you don't want to come back on.
Because sometimes you're looking at a whole panel and it's a lot of things, and so you don't know
4 to 6, so.
which ones to be pressing, so you could tape off.
I tape it off so you don't use
So
it.
they don't get pressed. Also remind people not to lean up against the wall where the lights are, because they can unexpectedly hit that too. So everyone needs to be aware of where the light panels are and who's going to be in charge of that, but also seeing if you can get those synced
And that's when
throughout the whole room.
I use my laser pointer for my clicker, and I make sure when they're about to go to video soon, make sure you have their phone number to text. Say, hey, we're about to do video, be ready, be off your phones. I even say get a chair sometimes and sit down, because you're might wait a while, and I use my little laser light and make sure everybody's ready to go, because it's your responsibility also to make sure it looks seamless. Next is computers and updates. All that during setup, you need all the computers out. You need, if they're going to be synced to the Wi-Fi, make sure you get the updates. Do what you can, because definitely for PCs, it'll take an hour to update something. And then you can't even turn off the computer to get rid of the update. It's a really pain in the ass.
So, I mean, when you know that your event is coming up, normally the day before, if you can go through any computers that you're going to be using, even tablets, any type of device that you're going to be using, and do all of the updates then. That way, if they do take hours on end, all of that is done ahead of time, and then turn off, the updates after that, right? That way, updates aren't coming up. There's normally a way on your computers that you can just tell it to not automatically update, and that way it's up to date to that date, and then the few days that you have your event, there aren't going to be any updates continually happening, because that really does bog the computer down. Sometimes it makes it turn off. It makes things lag and not
alerts,
work properly.
And you don't want the alerts
you have those
coming
pop-ups
through.
that come up. You don't want
You don't want alerts or anything else like that.
And you want everything else on your computer closed out too, so you don't have all those windows and notifications and things popping up while you have your event going on.
Yeah. Next is music. We could know, we talked about music before, about, certain kind of music that you can use, certain kind of music you can't.
And like we said, the caveat is you've got to know your audience and you've got to know your event, right? So knowing what is appropriate music and what isn't, by knowing who your demographic is, who your audience is, and what the event is that you're putting on, right? I mean, if it's a rock and roll event or if it's a hip hop rap event, then that's fine. But if it's not,
just save it for that.
Then you gotta know your audience and know what they're going to like or what's going to turn them off too, right? So music plays an integral part. And if you have to ask yourself, is this appropriate music? Then it's not, right?
And also the same with how loud your music is. You don't want it blasting.
It hurts people's ears. I mean, you want music enough that it has that ambiance and it's in the room and you can hear it and it gets the energy and things going.
And they are networking also. If the event's not going on, the music is before an event, on the break, or at the end of the event is over.
And so you got to think about what's taking place. And normally people are wanting to talk, and so if the music is so loud,
don't just blast it because you think it helps. It doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't help.
You want it at a good level where the energy is there, but people are still able to talk without having to yell. I mean, we've had events before where it's like you have to yell to the person standing right next to you to be able to hear, and it's like, huh, what? Oh, yeah. No, you want the music down at a good level so people can still carry on a conversation, but the music is still there that you hear.
So have it at a good tone, even if you need to mark it off with some tape. Yeah. You put some tape. Put a little marker for the music, and that's
so you know where it is, and you know you can keep it at that level. The other thing when you're talking about music is you need to go through your music list, because you're looking for the songs, but also because sometimes there's different music levels, right? So one song can be great, another song can be really loud, another song. You want to keep your music because you want to listen through it and make sure that it's all at the same volume of music, because if you're having it just play and then it goes up and down, you got to get that figured out before your event.
Yes. And then the next is for music, for your videos and audio and your PowerPoints. You want to have that tested ahead of time. You want to know if the speaker wants that intro video blasting.
Yeah, is she wanting to walk up, or is he wanting to walk up to something
blasting?
Or are they wanting a video to go? Are they wanting music? Like having all those
ahead
details.
of time, because they're always going to be in the back going, louder, come on, I can't hear it. Or, you're looking. And
that's
around.
All stuff, again, when we're talking about testing, that's all things beforehand that should be done ahead of time. So you've tested what they want. So you know when that person is coming up, what are they looking for? What do they want?
Because you already need to know if they have audio, music, videos, anything in that PowerPoint anyway.
Yep, they do. And that's all important. And then it makes the speaker or whomever is presenting, you want them to feel like what they wanted happened, right? So it's not like, well, I wanted it this and it was actually that, because then they're starting off in their head like, oh, well, I didn't get what I wanted, or my intro wasn't what I wanted, or that wasn't how I wanted. So you want to know what are they wanting, right? So that you can make sure you're delivering what they need. So when they get up on stage and they are speaking, they're not thinking, well, dang, my music wasn't the way I wanted, or that video didn't play, or because then they're already in their head versus walking up and feeling comfortable and confident and they're ready to go. So the job ahead of time makes the event more seamless for audio, visual, but also for the people who are involved, the speakers, the presenters, anyone, that they feel like they've been heard and that they got their requests as well.
Correct.
All right.
Next thing is the full mic check with the videographer.
If you have
one, they need to be there the day before, not the day of, coming in and just wanting to hook up something. Number one is probably using their cables anyway that they have to set up. They have to get their image right, make sure they're centered, make sure the coloring's right, make sure it's enough light. They're bringing the lights. If they're bringing the camera, they're bringing the lights. You want that set up. You want to make sure it's on a dimmer. their lights, their PARs, their LECOs, whatever they use, because they can blind the speaker. Like just one of the main speakers we work with has sensitive eyes.
Yeah.
They do not want to be blasted out because they like looking at the audience.
Yeah, and also if someone, you know, you need to know those things. Like, okay, does someone like it brighter? Does this speaker like it brighter? Do they have glasses? Is it reflecting off of that? Like,
Also,
those are
the lights in the room dark. Because sometimes you want the room a little darker. That means the lights are going to have to be a little
so those
higher.
are all things to think about and to know. And the way you know those is because you've addressed those before the event happened, right? You've talked to your speakers or your presenters or your videographer, and everyone's on the same page that we get there the day before. All the setups, all the tests, all the laying out the cords, testing. That's all done ahead of time. Now some people like to come in the day of, and that just causes chaos. And because if something doesn't work, then you gotta backtrack.
Speaker just comes with his with his thumb drive.
So everybody for the event needs to get there prior to the event. Now there are some,
that
events.
Arrive.
If you have multiple speakers and they're not going to be there all days, then they at least need to be there the break before. If they're going on in the afternoon and they didn't get in until that morning, by lunch they need to be there so you can test during lunch. Or
find out what they need.
If they're getting in the night before, then you can test that next morning. All these types of, but that's again written up in your speaker contracts, or that is written up in your, if you have videographers that you're using, or it's everyone's on the same page because you have given the expectation of what you're requiring of everyone for the event. Because again, it's about the experience of the event. It's about putting on the best event that you can, and that comes from making sure everyone's on the same page, everyone's prepared, and you're able to test and to know what everyone's needing, and they know what you need too.
Yes. The next thing is cable and adapters. Adapters, lightning adapters.
You gotta have a bag, like a bag.
A little baggy, have extra. Don't depend on the event to have that for you. Don't depend on the AV crew to have that for you.
Yeah.
If it's for your computer or what, it's your event, have extra. Make sure you have the kind, just say something small. For the iPads, they use the iPads for whatever they want to use, right? But the iPad's almost dead. So the lightning adapter doesn't have a spot to charge it at the same time.
I would say that is one major flaw.
They're changing all the time.
Yeah, and they're always, and every
now
new
it's
phone,
C. Now
every
it's C.
new
This, right.
computer, they all have new adapters. But the new way now for the last many
the C.
years is that, but it goes into the same port as
everything else.
as the charging port, right?
Yes.
So you don't have the charging port and then your
So
other port
you need
anymore.
your own kit. You need your own
Display.
to be able to display, to be able to have extra for Cs, for VGAs, even VGA.
And then what you can do is, because
And Ethernet also.
those cords aren't cheap, most of those. The Ethernet isn't bad, but
Yeah.
a lot of those other ones. So you just get it, and then you write, the name on it or whatnot. So you make
Keep
sure
it.
those get back to you, right?
Yes.
So then it's an investment one time, and then you got to keep
Yes,
every
and
time.
have an extra also.
And you gotta have
because
an
you might
extra.
be going to another event and you forgot
Yeah.
because you grabbed your computer, your power, and
It
you took
happens.
off.
So you always need to have duplicates, multiples
duplicate.
of it, and you can have one bag that has all the ones, and then the backup
Have
bag
an
has all
extra.
an extra. But you
Yep.
want to have all those things and not rely on anyone else to have it because maybe they don't. Even if your computer doesn't, having extras because someone else is going to forget theirs, they're not going to have it. It's not going to be what
It
you
doesn't
need.
cost much anymore.
No.
They used to cost $100. Now you can get them less than 30.
Yeah, and then just label them as yours, and then that way you make sure that you get them back. But also having more than what you think you need, because when you need it and you don't have it, that's not good.
Yes.
Right, and that's what we're always teaching you is be prepared. The more
Always,
prepared
no matter
you can
what,
be,
anything can happen.
No matter, in life, in business, at events, the more prepared, the more you can think of the challenges that might come up, the stuff that might happen, and circumvent that by, again, testing and having backups, but also having additionals and extras. That's all going to help you have a seamless, smooth event because things are going to come up. I mean, if you've had an event before, or been around, things come up. Now, depending on how prepared you are for things that come up, it can be a more smooth transition between the hiccups, right? Instead of like, oh, okay, we didn't think of that. Now what are we going to do, right? You've already thought of the challenges that could arise, and you've already put things in place. So when those do, you just move, right? You just
shuffle,
move from one to the next. And
if a speaker doesn't show up, that's okay.
Okay, so you always have extra that you can give. You always can go to Q&A, or you can have
content.
an extra presentation that you could do, or maybe you have a networking time, or there's all kinds of stuff that you can flux through.
You can even put up a map on the screen where everybody is, and then separate and talk.
Yep. So there's and again, if you're not prepared for those things, when those things come up, it could seem like, okay, what are we doing now? But if you've already thought, look, if this happens, we're doing this. If this happens, we're doing this. Just like in life, you know what I mean? Like we're going through all the time and saying, okay, well, everything's peachy keen, then we just keep going this way. But if something happens in life, right, what is your backup? What is your plan? What are you going to do, right? Same thing with events. Same thing with AV. Same thing with event production, event planning. Right. Things are going to come up. And the more that you can already be past and be thinking about those things, it makes it a lot easier to...
AV guy might not show up.
That's happened.
And everything, hey, if everything's there, get your ass, sit down, turn on the mixer. Everything's gonna be there. Just figure it out.
And that's what we talk about.
Have somebody, an extra person.
When you're doing in-house AV, I mean, they sometimes don't show up too.
Yeah.
Or when you're getting outside AV, it's not always about going with the cheapest. It's about going with the person that you know is one, they get back to you promptly. They're going to show up, because if you go with the cheapest and then that day they just don't feel good, they don't show up, that's not good for you, right?
No.
So you want to know when you're talking to them.
Be crap
right.
Also.
You want to talk, what kind of equipment do you have? How often do you update it? How new is it? How many people do you have on your crew? How people are going to come help set up? All those kind of things, because if John is out one day, well, Bob can come in, right? Or whomever, then it's like, okay, I feel more comfortable and confident, even though we're going to be paying a little bit more for this person over here, because I'm going to have more peace of mind knowing, one, their equipment's going to be good, and two, they're actually going to show up.
Right. Also, for the lights, get back to the lights. You can ask, can they be synced? They can sync the lights for the whole room.
Usually.
Sometimes. Let's say 25% of the time, right?
No, more than that.
No, not for me.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it depends. It depends on the venue, and it depends on if it's an older venue.
You might even be able to get a mixer for the lights.
Yeah. So
they bring you a box and you just turn them on and off.
Yeah. And again, you don't get if you don't ask, right? So if you don't ask them, and that's something though, when you're looking at venues, should be one of the questions that you're asking is like, hey, so we're going to be in, room this and room that and that. Do those all work together? Can we sync the lights? Can we do things with that? How is that going to work? Because that way you're not just showing up blind. They already know, and they can have that stuff done ahead of time for you. Yes. So when you get there, they've already had that worked out. They've already synced them. They've already put it together. Yes. They've shown they're ready to go.
Right.
Versus you showing up and saying, oh, well, can we sync the lights? Well, that's a good question to ask when you're looking for venues. Right. Because if you're looking at a couple different venues and one can and one can't, maybe you want to go with the one that can, to make it a little easier when you're doing lights up and down.
And at your event, you must test everything. Everything must be tested. Just say if you have a video wall, run through those systems, run through that format, run through those pictures and video the day before, not the day of. When you get in that morning, same thing, full cycle. Run, make sure. Some bulbs might be out. Something might be happening. Make sure it's taped down. Make sure somebody doesn't bump, who's going to bump that video wall is going to trip on something. Make sure it's tested. Also, lighting and truss. They make sure they have sandbags on top. Make sure everything's tightened. Make sure, shake it if you have to. Those truss, if they have them on stage. Or even in the audience.
On the stage.
And jump around. Make sure they're not, the lights connected to them aren't going.
You don't want things to move. You don't want things to fall. And you don't want there to be a hazard, right? So some speakers, they're very heavy-footed. So when they get up onto the riser, which, some
It just happened to me. They had to change out a third of the riser. Because it was going.
Yep.
And we were videotaping, and you don't want unless you're mixing.
And most events you're not, unless
You're
it's
not.
you know a dance party. And though that's why it's so important to. Normally the venue is bringing in the riser most of the time, right?
Yes.
So you want to test that. You want to
Even if
walk.
it's taped down,
you want to move. You want
have them undo
to. Do
it.
you hear things? Is it really shaky? That can all be fixed ahead of time when
Right.
you're testing out that. And the same thing with making sure that anything you have on stage is secure.
A set of some sort.
Yep.
Something nice. Make sure it's tight. Make sure if it gets bumped, it's not going to fall.
Those are all things
you
you
can
want to
even
test.
tape down. Make sure yellow tape. You know that's your path, but you still should be able to touch something without it falling.
Yeah.
And
That comes down to all your
it's a
testing.
lawsuit on
too.
your hand.
Yeah.
It's gonna be something heavy behind you, and you don't want it to fall.
So test on all of those things to make sure they're safe and secure. And if you do have things out in the crowd, then you need to make sure those are extra safe because people are clumsy. People don't understand that things shouldn't be touched or backed into or what.
Backed into a lot.
A lot. So if you can spread it out a little bit more so it's not such a tight fit where it's going to be bumped all the time and someone might hit it, someone might bump it, it might fall over. If you can have a little more room, a little more space to spread that out, that's good too. But remember, people who are attending the event aren't thinking of these things.
They're not paying attention.
And they're not paying attention. They're like in a whirlwind of everything that's going on, right? And so the more that you can circumvent that by making sure that you have things taped properly, making sure that you have things put secure and put away where they're not going to be such an obstacle people have to go around, the better.
Also, step and repeat. Step and repeat is
it's like your walls.
Your
They
wall of
photo
some
walls
sort
a
with
lot
your
of times.
logo on it.
Yeah.
And make sure there's light on that.
Yeah.
That's gonna help you for your social media.
Yeah. And
You
people
know, they're
normally
gonna post it.
The whole point of your step and repeat or your photo wall is for people to take pictures in front of it. So you want to give them lighting so it looks good there. So when they are sending it out to friends or later on they're putting it in on their social media or they're tagging you, you want it to look good. It's a reflection of you, right?
Yes.
So if you're going to go ahead and pay the money to have the step and repeat done, then make sure you set it up correctly so that they have the lighting. But again, then you got to make sure all this stuff's secure too, because they're going to be out there fumbling around. Oh, come on again, and they're all going to get in, and it's a whole thing, right?
Right.
So making sure that that is secure and well lit is what you want to do.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And even if when you're testing everything, even if you have a confetti machine, boom!
Yeah.
Do it a small amount.
Test
do
it.
it the day before. Do it towards a wall. Don't do it out in the open where
You gotta clean
the
it all
staff
up.
has to clean everything.
They won't like you very much
No,
for that.
just like when the kids are playing with something and they're aiming at something to the door.
Yeah.
Do it to the door, not just out in the open. Number one, you won't lose it as fast. Your little rockets or your little bow and arrows.
This is a parenting tip, not so
bow
much.
and arrows. It goes in one area.
Shoot that direction, guys.
That direction.
Okay.
Same with your
Yeah.
Pure.
Well, and normally when you're getting ready to do your big confetti or your t-shirt launches or
Boom!
whatever you're shooting,
Yeah.
you've built it up to something that's so great and grand.
Oh.
And if it
Here we go, playing the music.
and if it doesn't go off, then that's just like air out of a balloon,
nothing.
right?
Nothing.
So test
Yeah.
all of that stuff ahead of time, but
Yeah.
test it in a manner that it's not going to make a big mess everywhere for you.
Right, just like laser lights and fog.
Oh.
If you have that, you might use it at night at a party.
Don't overdo the fog.
Don't overdo it.
People start, and also
lasers, just
it depends
check.
on, is your venue well ventilated or not? Because if you're outside and you're using it, that's different because it can
Different.
disperse. If
Yes.
you're inside
It's
and a
stuck.
confined, it's stuck in there. So
And you want the kind that does dissipate on its own, not that heavy, thick stuff that you don't want to breathe in.
yeah, and pay attention to that because it can cause people challenges with breathing.
Yes.
It lingers for a long time. So if you're inside, it's much different than if you're outside.
Right.
So know your location. Do some tests to see how long does it take for this to dissipate.
Yeah.
Do you have the right lasers and things to make it look really cool? Are
Right.
people choking and gagging? The other thing is,
And no slippery mess either on stage.
and are there smoke detectors? If you're outside, you don't have to worry about this.
Right,
But if you're
but if it's
inside,
right there.
the fog
Can cause
make
something.
them go off.
Yes.
So that's something
just
you want to
little
test.
squirts, little at a time. Don't just keep it going. Keep it going.
You've got to test that because you do not want a fire alarm going off in the middle of your event, because that takes forever to get fixed, because normally at most venues the fire department has to come out to turn it off and make sure that everything is fine and reset it. So that's a long time.
And when you're testing water, if you have water features, you want to test that. You want to make sure the power works, or you're going to have your.
You want to make sure it's not going to make a big mess wherever it is.
You don't want a mess everywhere. You might have to use less water. Is it still going to have the same effect?
Test.
Are there lighting with the feature? Make sure you test it the day before, not the morning of, because the morning of you made a big mess.
Yeah, and
everywhere,
you don't have time to clean
and
it
it's a
up.
big wet spot.
Yeah, and then that's a hazard. People can slip. People can
fall.
Plus, it ruins a lot of the carpet. It's just stuff you don't want. And then centerpieces on the table. Depending on what you're wanting, you want to make sure people can still see around.
Yeah, don't
you
have
want to
it
make
too
sure
tall.
your lights work in them.
Inside, yes.
Unless you're doing like a wedding or something like that, where you do want the opulence of it. You want it tall. But a lot of times, if you're wanting people to be able to see or talk, maybe it's at around. Keep it there, not too distracting. If you're going to use candles. A lot of places now we're going to more LED candles instead of actual candles.
New batteries.
You want to make sure everything's working ahead of time. How are you getting those things turned on? Are they going to be on the whole event? Or it's only going to be in the evening time? So think about that, because if people are, maybe you need to take a break to be able to go around and turn everything on. So that's all things to think about. For your centerpieces, making sure that they're not too top heavy, so that people are at the tables. It's not going to fall everywhere and go everywhere.
Right, the minute you
and make
touch
a mess.
the tablecloth, it's ready to tilt her.
So think about that, and then test that when you get there too, to make sure that you don't have any issues with your centerpieces.
Right. Another thing you want to test your walkie-talkies. Your connection. How many do you have?
That they're not too loud.
Are they charged the night before? Are you using different batteries? Whatever you need, just test it.
You also want to test your walkie-talkies and make sure they're on when you're doing your mic checks. And then have them being talked back and forth while the mic is on.
Something that's in your ear, not something that's on the side of your head.
Because that could cause interference with your mics or your walkie-talkies or back and forth. And then you want to test the distance of, if you're over here in a breakout room, do they still work with the person that you have in the main room? Or if you're outside taking care of something.
Even if AV needs to reach somebody, hey, we have an emergency or the lights are off or something, you'd be able to get in touch with the right person right away.
So being able to test all of that ahead of time, and those are all, and there's so many things, but what you want to do, depending on the type of event you're having, you want to look at not just the audio things, the extra things too, and say, okay, what are we doing to test this? What are we doing to make sure we have backups if we need it?
Checklist.
Yep, and you've got to go through everything. So do you have centerpieces? Are you doing extra features? Are you doing fun things like,
a money machine?
A money machine. Or are you going to have other things come in? Are you going to have someone come in and do some sort of show right in the middle of your... You got to know all those things. You got to test that.
Magician or something. Yep.
Yeah, or maybe you're having a band or a musician come in. Those are all. You never know, right? Yeah. So what are their requirements? What do they need? How can you test that? Yep. And then so it's more than just your basic electronics that you're going to be testing. You've got to think and test everything.
Everybody who's coming in.
And then think about what do you do in case something happens.
That's right.
What are your backups, right?
Right.
Alrighty, guys.
Great to back up.
It is. Well, and it's important because the thing that we always preach over here is your event is an experience, right?
Yes,
and if you don't,
experience for sure.
If you don't test and have backups, the experience could be not a great one. Versus if a challenge arises, but you tested it, you already know that, you fix it before it becomes a challenge. And it's all about the experience that you're delivering from beginning to middle to end throughout. And that comes from testing, backing up, and making sure that you're prepared and that everyone's on the same page for your event, so everyone knows what to expect and what needs to happen.
Yes, and they'll have a great time.
Yep. All right, anything else you want to cover?
That's it.
Alrighty, guys, thank you so much for spending time with us, and make sure that you start implementing this. It's only as good as us talking to you if you don't implement, right? So start, what can you use and what can you utilize from what we discussed today, and start putting it into immediate action, start implementing it, start using it. And then as always, if you have questions, feel free to message us anytime you'd like, and we look forward to talking to you guys again soon.
We're here for you.
Thanks so much. Bye guys.